So Biz, you've now an entrepreneur, but that's probably not what you were thinking of when you were a young man or child. Was this by accident? Was this by design? How did you get here?
Yeah, I'm also a CEO now too, which is new for me. But I think I pretty much think I accidentally became an entrepreneur. But when I was a kid, I always wanted to be an inventor. My mother was adopted, but her adopted father, who died before I was born, actually worked for Bell Telephone, and he left his workshop in the basement, which had all these gears and springs and wires and all sorts. And so I would just say I'm going downstairs to invent things, and I would just attach all these things together and see what happened. But I started out. I thought I wanted to be an artist, and so that's what I got, scholarship. A scholarship for excellence in the arts, and somehow I fell into becoming a technologist and an entrepreneur.
So it wasn't by design,
there's a whole story of how it happened. If you're interested,
just give us the short version.
Okay, I'll try to do the short version. So I went to university on this Chancellor Scholarship for Excellence in the Arts. I wasn't really enjoying the university. It was designed by a guy who usually designs prisons, and it sort of felt like that to me. And yet I had this side job moving heavy boxes at a publishing company, and so I was moving the boxes. And this was at a time in the 1990s when they were first the art department, the department that designs the covers for the books, was switching over from spray glue and X-Acto knives and Amberlith and stat machines and all these things that you guys probably have never even heard of, over to just desktop publishing. And it was kind of a shock to them, but everything was being switched. And I had grown up learning how to use Macs, and specifically very interested in how to create art on Macs. And so the whole department went out to lunch. One day I designed a jacket cover that needed designing. I printed it out, I matted it up, I slipped it in with the others to go off for approval in New York City for sales and editorial. And then I went back to the boxes. And when the art director came back, he said he wanted to know who designed this cover, which one of, like, he was confused because he didn't know how this one got designed. And I said, I did. And he was like, the box kid. And I was like, yeah. And so one thing led to another. He gave me a job, offered me a job, and I said, well, I should probably not. I mean, don't people go to university to get this kind of job? So I figured I was sort of skipping 2 years ahead. And so I took the job, and I went in for my first day and knocked on his door, even though it was open, just to be polite. And he beckoned me in wordlessly, and I went into his desk, and he reached behind him without saying a word and took out the exact book he wanted, put it down, opened it up. It was the Pantone color guide. He was flipping through the colors, through the reds and into the browns and into sort of a mocha color chip. He ripped it out, put it on his desk, still no words, slid it over to me with a finger and said, that's how I take my coffee. And I was like, oh my God, I dropped out of university on this scholarship. Like, how am I gonna, I only have $1.75 in my pocket. I'm gonna have to pour the cream in the coffee to match the swatch. And like, I thought I was gonna have a job here. And he was like, what kind of a jerk do you think I am? I'm like, of course you don't. So he was actually a really nice guy. I apprenticed with him for 2 years. He taught me a lot about graphic design. By the way, graphic design is a great field to study because it sort of teaches you that creativity is an infinite resource. There's not like three opportunities, 3 ways to design a book jacket. There's infinite. Anyway, so while I was there, he filled my brain with his glory days before he took a full-time job of when he had his own studio and he was designing all kinds of different things and making all this money. So I worked for him for 2.5 years, and then I decided that I would start a studio. And I quickly realized that getting book covers was not gonna make enough money. And somebody came to me and they said, look, my boss wants me to get a website built. Our budget is $5,000. Do you do websites? And I was like, Absolutely, I do websites. So I didn't have any clue how to build websites, but I figured out fast. And then I started just raking it in, doing websites, not doing a very good job. And then my friends who had graduated college went into consulting, hated consulting, were sick of telling other people how to run their companies, wanted to start their own company, and they came to me like, well, you're the web guy. We should start a web company together and so we started a social network in 1999 that only Asian Americans remember, called Xanga, Xanga.com. For some reason it was dominated by Asian Americans. And that was how I accidentally got into like starting companies and then being on that side of the screen. And then I ended up going to Google, and then once you go to Google, you're sort of in Silicon Valley and you can't get out.
Now, in those early days, in your book, and there's a wonderful book that Biz Stone wrote that I recommend to all of you, you talk actually about a really tough time about being in deep personal debt and not knowing how to get out of it.
Oh, yeah.
Can you just share it and actually also give advice? Is it a good idea for entrepreneurs?
It's not a good
idea.
I wouldn't recommend doing this. But first of all, I grew up on welfare, so we never had any money. I've been working since I was 8 years old to like sort of contribute to the family and everything. And then as soon as I was out of my own, I got a credit card and I just started like we ran out of money at Xanga and I was paying my New York City rent with my credit card. Not a good idea. I was up to about $75,000 in credit card debt with a 25% interest rate, and I just let it go and go and go, and if I had calculated how much it would take to pay it off, it would be like 2,000 years and $20 million. But I just had this weird thing, like, well, I'm just gonna go for it here, and my future self will figure it all out. He'll be smarter, and he'll just know what to do. So, and in fact, my favorite sort of cheers was, "Here's to our future selves. I hope he gets me out of this mess." Because I would always just sort of like go for it. Like, okay, let's just go for it. Even when I got the job at Google, it was finally a chance. I got there before the IPO. It IPO'd. I could start selling my stock, and I was getting out of debt. I finally hit zero, and I quit, and then went right back starting back into debt because I could have stayed and become a millionaire, but instead I quit. And we can talk about that reason later. But I loved it there, but I quit, and instantly went back into debt, and the debt grew and grew and grew, and then because the first startup after Google was also didn't do well, and started paying for things with my credit card, and so, it's only fairly recently that I still wake up in the morning thinking like, is there a coffee can in the house with coins that I can pour into the Coinstar and get some? I mean, it seems like only 2 weeks ago that we were doing that. Like, oh my God, $80 of coins! This is great. We can buy beer. So it's like, and I always have dreams that I'm trying to get the first and last month's rent on an apartment. And the apartment is like a room in my house in my dream. And then I wake up and I'm like, wait a minute, this is my house. I don't have to rent a room in this house. What? Wait, where am I? Anyway, but I wouldn't recommend paying your rent in New York City with your credit card. And hoping that your future self solves all the problems that you're making. But I love that guy. He totally solved it. He figured it all out.
Now, staying with your future self, in the book you say, at one moment, we had a chance of being the king of podcasts. And you said, I don't want to do that.
Well, what happened was, this is where I learned about the importance of emotional investment in what you're doing. In other words, like really, like, wanting to see it in the world, thinking and wanting to use it yourself. What happened was I left Google because I had moved from Boston to California, not necessarily to work at Google, but to work with Evan Williams at Google on the blogger team, because blogging had been that factored in big in my first startup, and I was absolutely enchanted by the idea that you didn't need to code in order to have a voice on the internet, and I just thought this is an incredible wave. This is the democratization of information. It gives voice to the voiceless. It's just absolutely amazing, and just even on a personal level, on a personal sort of, just for myself, I was like, it makes me look like I know what I'm doing on the internet. Instead of building these crappy websites, now I can just pick a template and it looks great. And I was like, people are gonna think I know what I'm doing. And I just loved it. And I'd followed Evan Williams' blog, and I was just like, this is a guy that I need to work with. Like, I'm meant to work with this guy. And I even wrote to him and I said, I think I'm the missing member of your team. And so it was he that I went to work with at Google, and his company had been acquired, so he only had this 2-year deal and he could leave, so he left. And then when he left, I was like, what am I doing here? Alone at Google. And so I sort of had this soul-searching moment of like, well, did I come out here to work at Google, or was it to work with Evan? It was to work with Evan, so we had this idea in a car ride home from Google that I said, Evan, look, these iPods seem to be becoming very popular, and you can record your voice in Flash in the browser. Couldn't we write a client, a web client or a downloadable client that just takes what you record in the browser, turns it into MP3 and syncs it to an iPod, therefore democratizing radio, and or at least time-shifting radio programs? And he was like, oh, he did it. That's a face he makes when he thinks something's a good idea. He goes, his usual faces. But so we started this company called Odeo, and the idea was to be a podcasting service. But this was in 2005, and so we started the service. We were doing too much. We had a recording studio in the browser. We had a discovery mechanism for podcasts and a few other things we had going on. And what happened was, what kicked things off was Apple decided to just put podcasting into iTunes. And we were like, well, that's probably a good place for it. We didn't expect for them to adopt such a nerdy thing right away. And we were like, okay, so Apple's now putting it right in iTunes, which makes a lot more sense. And it makes a lot of sense to use GarageBand to record your podcast because the browser often crashed. So we had to pick a focus. That didn't kill us. It made us pick a focus. So actually, what Evan did was he sort of went off to have a think, and he decided this is what we should do. This is what Odeo should just focus specifically in this part of podcasting, and he showed me what he thought, and I was like, this is brilliant. This is absolutely genius. A genius thing. We went out for whiskey and sushi, and I was telling him, I said, this is a brilliant idea. This is definitely the right thing for Odeo, and it's going. If we do this right, it'll mean we are the kings of podcasting. And he was like, wow, you really like this idea. And I was like, but here's the thing. Do you want to be the king of podcasting? Because we had never made a podcast, nor did we listen to them. And as soon as that left, those words like entered his ears, he was like, oh. He just had this moment of realization where, like, even if we succeed, I don't even want to do this company. And he was like, oh, no, I don't want to. That's not what I want to do. And so I was like, so what are we going to do now? And he was like, oh, God. So that was key. That was a lesson learned about sort of, even if you have a good idea that you think people will like, you shouldn't do it unless you want to use it and you want to see it in the world because you're excited about it. And so what ultimately happened was we sort of gave up on that, and in the interim, it was Evan who suggested that everyone in the company, which is about a dozen of us, pair up and just work on whatever, anything but podcasting. And Jack Dorsey was an engineer we hired, and he and I had become very friendly at Odeo during the year that we worked there, and so we automatically teamed up, and we hacked together Twitter, an early version, and everyone thought it was stupid, but I mean, it just didn't sound good at all. Like, we pitched it, we were like, okay, we each got a chance to sort of say what we were doing, and we were like, so here's our thing, and I designed a thing that sort of worked, and it was like, okay, so you say what you're doing, and then the people who click follow, they can get what you said you were doing on SMS or the web, and everyone was like, and I was like, that's it, isn't it great? It's so simple, and they were like, no. And the other guys had come up with like these productivity apps and stuff like that. And so everyone liked everything. Everybody else's were way better, according to their team. But Jack and I were so excited about it, because particularly me, I love simplicity because I'm somewhat of a simpleton. I just like when I automatically know how to use something right away. Without having to learn about it. I never read the manual of how to put something together. I'm like, whatever, I think I know it. Put it together. That didn't work. So that's how Twitter actually got its start. And Evan noticed that Jack and I were very, very interested in it. He sort of took us aside quietly and said, why don't you guys keep working on it? You seem really into it. So that's what we did.
So when did you know that Twitter was actually something real? What were the signs that made you say, yes, this is actually going somewhere?
Yeah, there were a few little things, and then there was one really big thing. So what had happened in the interim was we couldn't find anyone to buy Odeo. Until I went to Evan, I said, I know a buyer. And he was like, no, you don't. There's nobody who wants to buy it. And I was like, yes, I do. I've figured out who's going to buy it. And he was like, no, you haven't. And I tortured him for a little while. And then finally I said, you're rich, right? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, you buy it. And he was like, that's an interesting idea, because we had only spent I think we raised $4 million, and we spent $1 million of the $4 million that we raised for Odeo. So it really just meant giving back the $3 million and then buying everything for $1 million. And he was like, well, this has never really been done before. And it's like kind of weird. Why don't we just pretend we're doing it together? That way, like, I can sort of blame you if it goes wrong. And I was like, I don't care, sure. Later on, he would admonish me, like, you should care more about your reputation. But I said, sure, let's just say it's the both of us. Because people figured I was rich because I worked at Google, but I really had no money. And so we formed a group called we formed like an LLC or something at the time called The Obvious Group, because everything exceptional is obvious in retrospect. And so Obvious bought Odeo and all of its assets, which included Twitter. So we were just operating under this sort of, I guess, a labs type of thing, or I guess an incubator type of thing, because there were other guys doing other things, Odeo amongst them still. And Jack and I were working on Twitter, and there were a couple little things that I'll share. There was one little thing where it's fun because I still have the GChat records of this. I did all of the designing, and Jack was doing the programming, and there was a moment where he was like, okay, I'm gonna try to get SMS to show up on the web now. And I was like, all right, go for it. And he's like, I think we've got it worked out. And he said, hold on, I'm gonna send a message now. And he sent a message, and it showed up on my browser. And then I G-chatted him. I wrote to him, come in here, Watson, I need you. And we were very excited about that. And then very early on, there were some earthquakes. Like for example, when people started using Twitter, just a few people, someone said like, earthquake in San Jose. And I was like, earthquake in San Jose, huh? And then I felt an earthquake. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I knew about it. I knew about the earthquake before I felt it. That's weird. Like Twitter is faster than the earthquake. And then I was like, that seems like it could be useful. And then and then there were other moments, like, and there was another key moment, going back to emotional investment. We were still prototyping it, and it's kind of just from some friends, like maybe 20 friends were using it. And my wife and I had this little tiny, like 400 square foot house in Berkeley, and it was a heat wave. And I had watched a show called This Old House when I was a kid, and it was all about how, they fix up these old houses. And very often in the show, they would tear up the carpeting and reveal these beautiful hardwood floors underneath that was like from the 1800s or something. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do that today during this heat wave. And so I started just took one of those utility knives and I just cut the carpet right across the middle, and I started ripping it out and realized there was no floor whatsoever. And I was like, great, I've just ruined the carpeting and there's no floor. Well, what the hell, I'll just keep ripping it, I guess. And I was like sort of cursing and ripping. And I was like, I'm ruining the house to my wife. I was just saying that as I did it. And she was like, okay. And then I got my phone buzzed in my pocket. And this was pre-iPhone. I had a Trio. And it buzzed in my pocket. And it was Evan. And he had tweeted, in Napa Valley, sipping a Pinot Noir after having a massage. And I just started laughing out loud at the incongruity of the two things. Like, I was having a miserable time, and he's sipping Pinot Grigio after a massage. And I'm laughing out loud. Now my wife's thinking I'm going totally crazy. But the point was, I sort of had this like sort of out-of-body experience. Like, wait a minute, I'm laughing out loud at something that we've built. I must be doing the right thing. It's making me joyous. So we must be onto something. And then the true moment, though, however, was we still only had like maybe we hadn't, maybe 10,000 people were registered on Twitter. And it was March of 2007, and we went to this conference called South by Southwest, which is primarily a music and film conference, but has a little interactive session in the beginning. Now, it's a very big interactive session, but and we'd been going to it for years, and it was mostly Bay Area nerds who go there and they talk about what they're working on, and we went, and all of the early adopters who were trying out Twitter, who are all, by the way, saying how stupid it was, but they were nevertheless using Twitter to say how stupid it was. The overlap of early adopters in the Bay Area and the people who go to South by Southwest was like 85%. So basically, everyone went to Texas, and first of all, I walked into a room where there's all these conferences going on at the same time concurrently. And I walked into the back of one of them, and I saw like a sea of laptops, all of them opened up to twitter.com. And I was like, whoa, people are using our thing. And then I heard a story that absolutely changed everything, which was, I heard a story about a guy who was at a pub, and what he really wanted to do was talk with his fellow nerd friends about what they were working on. And the pub had grown very loud, and the music had started, and there was a lot of drunk people there. And so he sent out a tweet that said, whoever wants to talk about projects, let's meet at this other pub down the street. It's very quiet. And in the 8 minutes it took him to walk to that pub, it had completely filled to capacity, and there's a line around the block. And it was because he had sent out the tweet. The people who followed him had sent out the same tweet. The people who followed them had sent out the same tweet. So this fan-out mechanism occurred. And I was absolutely flabbergasted when I heard this story, because I knew I'd been studying this biological concept of emergence or superorganisms, and it happens in nature all the time. And the idea of a flock of birds, flock of individual birds flying together, and then coming to a tree, and then all of a sudden acting as one, and then continuing. It was like, it looks like they must have practiced this a million times. Like, how else could they do this beautiful movement all together at once? And yet the mechanics of flocking are very rudimentary. It's just a bird following another bird's shoulder, and so on, until they look like they can move as one. So it's like individuals, one organism, individuals again, and that happens in nature in a lot of places. But there's no such thing for humans. And the hair stood on the back of my neck, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a party, but what if it had been a crisis moment or something? Like, everyone just instantly became one organism and moved at the same time within 8 minutes of this place. And I thought, wow, that is a new invention. Like, we have invented a new thing. And so when we got back 2 days later to San Francisco, that's when we incorporated Twitter, and really started thinking we really had made something new, and actually filed a provisional patent, which we got in 2013, I think. So my dream of being an inventor when I was a kid was realized. I have a patent for a device-agnostic message routing system. That was the moment, though, that really sort of, for us, solidified. There weren't that many people on the service. What was funny was, after that, we really started getting noticed, and we started getting linked a lot in the press. Like, to everywhere there was something going on, where people happened to be using Twitter, Twitter became part of that story, so we were getting tons of free press. And what was I going to say about that? I forgot what I was going to say, but nevertheless, that was the turning point for us.
Lovely. Let me move on, because I mean, we now know about Twitter. It's a famous story. As you said, you've got fabulous coverage. You moved out of Twitter. You've done a few other things. Now you're very busy with Jelly. And the thing I'm really curious about is that you were a blogger and Twitter, and that's all about words.
Yeah.
And now you've moved into the visual world, and you're an artist. How different is that? Why did you move from words to images?
Actually, we moved to images for a while, and we've moved back to words. Again, the latest, we launched the latest version of Jelly a month ago, and there's an element of imagery in it, which is, we call them magic images. They show up along with your question, because we noticed that questions with images get more attention. But it's funny that you say I started out as an artist, and I sort of realized a little while ago that maybe my art now is, at a very meta level, my art is enabling other people to express themselves. So an artist usually expresses himself in some medium, and maybe my art is allowing other people to express themselves, like hundreds of millions of people. If I want to still claim I'm an artist. But Jelly now is actually, should I talk about Jelly now?
Yeah,
absolutely. We've just launched this. Well, actually, we've been around for a few years, and we've been trying different things. The first approach didn't work at all, so we pivoted to a completely different thing that was all about imagery. And that was working okay, actually. And Ben and I got into a room to discuss shutting down the original Jelly in favor of this other thing, which we called Super. And first of all, it was kind of telling that we never shut down Jelly in the first place, even though we pivoted to this thing called Super. and we got into a room to discuss, okay, how properly to shut down Jelly and focus on Super. And we left the room more convinced than ever that what we should really be doing is Jelly, the original concept. And the original concept was there should be another way, there should be some other kind of search engine besides Google. Or at least there should be another way to get answers besides classic web search. Because, a lot of people are working on AI, but what about just I? There's this old adage that says we all die with our stories still inside of us. So, what's published on the internet is but a drop in the ocean of what's actually known, and what's experienced, and the opinions, and all these things that are locked inside the minds of people all over the world. And we were thinking there's got to be a way that we can access this and make this available to people so that people can basically help each other. And some of the rhetoric we developed was, what is the point of such a connected society? And the new 6 degrees of separation is actually 4. It's 3.8. The study was redone, and so why are we so connected? And maybe unconsciously we became this connected society for some higher purpose, and the only higher purpose we could think was to help each other. It's not to play games at the same time across the internet. It's got to be to help each other. So that was sort of Jelly's idea, was harness the most connected humankind has ever been in order to help one another. And so Jelly now, this third try at Jelly seems to be working actually better than expected. And there's a component of timing element to it as well. Just like with Twitter, we developed Twitter for SMS, for feature phones, and then a year later, the iPhone came out, and it was just perfect timing. And so now with Jelly, what we've done is we've said, okay, it's a search engine. It looks, if you go to askjelly.com, it just looks like, okay, I know how to use this. It's a search box. And you don't have to have an account, and you just type in your search. And we use a bunch of AI and a bunch of routing algorithms and so forth, but we don't search the web. What we do is, and we don't index the web for the most relevant document. What we do is, to put it crudely, we index people and what they potentially know. And we assign a weight to each subject they might know, and we route, the questions coming in are automatically topicified. And then once they have topics added to them, they're then routed to people who have subscribed to these topics because they want to answer questions in these topics. It's surprising. People often say, how do you incentivize people to answer the questions? People love answering questions when they know the answers. It's like, and there's been neuroscience studies that show that when you help another person, the same brain chemical is released in the same amounts as when you win at gambling. Dopamine is the brain chemical. People are familiar with that. So what we developed a feedback system where if you answer a question and then the person who asked it finds it helpful, they touch helpful, and then you get the message that you were very helpful and you feel great and you want to do it again. And so we designed it to look like a search engine, except what we're really doing is we're sending it to other people and they're answering a question. And so like I said, it's working really well, and so 100% of the questions are getting answered, and 95% of them are getting answered within a median time of 14 minutes, which is going down because we just a couple of weeks ago launched what we call magic answers, because a surprising amount of people ask the same question. Different people who don't know each other are asking pretty much the exact same question. And if we already have that question and it's already been marked helpful 30 times, what we do is we just deliver that to them immediately. How about this? And it's like, wow, this is great. This worked instantly. So about 20% of our questions in climbing are already have great answers, even a month in. And so what happened was, I was at South by Southwest again this past year, and I was raving about the Amazon Echo. Have you all heard of the Amazon Echo? And now the Google Home, and Siri's open now, and Microsoft Cortana. All of these things are basically a voice operating system. And I really do think that that's what we're heading towards. So we started out talking to one another. That's how we made things happen. And then you can fast forward to personal computers and accessing through a terminal. And then along comes the concept of let's mimic the desktop and have folders and documents. And then all of a sudden it's tactile. We're touching things on a screen and moving things around. And now we're just going back to voice. And having this Alexa, she's called, in my home has become such a staple for me. I'm used to just talking to my computer now. I'm used to telling Alexa to turn the heat on in my house, or play Haydn, or set a timer for 30 minutes, or how far is the sun from Earth, to answer my son's question, and whatever it is. I mean, I'm staying at a hotel now, and I said Alexa out loud, and I realized, oh, she's not here. And so I really, really do think VR and AR are going to be these amazing things. They're going to be awesome. I invested in Magic Leap, which is an AR company, and I think they're going to be so great for entertainment and also for education and some business applications as well, because they place you in a moment. You could be at this lecture, but really in your living room, and it would feel just as the same. And so they'll have their place, but I think the workhorse operating system of the future is just talking to our computers, because we've gotten to a point now where natural language processing is pretty good, more than pretty good, and except the key missing part of a voice OS is search, because you cannot, it's absurd to think about desktop search and mobile search, which is just desktop search on mobile. You can't, with voice OS, you can't just send pages and pages of hyperlinks. What you need with the voice OS is the answer. If you ask a question, do Gap jeans run bigger than Levi's jeans, generally? The voice OS has to say no. But you can't get, there's no such thing as that. So it turns out that Jelly is perfect for the voice OS. And not only that, it's the only search engine in the world that can answer subjective questions, like what should I wear to this party? And it's the only search engine in the world that can tell you asked the wrong question. Here's what you really meant to ask. So I raved about it at South by Southwest, and then Amazon actually had us up, like picking our brains, like this is the missing part. So now the timing is perfect for us, and so I think this is just going to be great, because we have this right place, right time, and we're very excited about the future of voice OS.
Super. In the spirit of asking questions.
No, super's done.
No. Excellent.
So, but also, by the way, one more thing. We did in order to, it was going to be embarrassing to, we did Jelly. We publicly announced Jelly failed. We pivoted to Super. We said, Super's the thing. It's going to be great. And then we decided we wanted to go back to Jelly again, and we're like, oh God, how are we going to, this is embarrassing, like changing our mind so much. We're going to look wishy-washy. So I came up with a term that I knew that the press would love. I said, let's call it an unpivot. We're unpivoting. Someone else was like, maybe that's a pirouette. I was like, no. Let's call it the unpivot. And so, and of course, this was picked up by all these press, and I think it was BuzzFeed did this great article about like the most famous unpivots in history, like prohibition and things like this. And so, look, at the very least, if we fail at everything else, we will have introduced new jargon to Silicon Valley.
Of unpivot.
Yeah.
Talking of questions and having all the right answers, we have lots of questions in the audience.
Great.
So let's hand it over to Yes.
I told you I
over
would
there.
talk a lot.
We have that. We've got some time for a few questions. So
I'll try to keep my answers
lady
shorter.
in mustard color, if I see that correctly.
What?
That's right.
Hi, Biz.
Hi.
My name is
I can hear.
My name is Leah, and you mentioned at the beginning that when you were growing up, you grew up on welfare. I read this article that went viral on Medium a few months ago about this concept of mindset inequality. So people who grew up in poor socioeconomic backgrounds are less likely to take massive risks like starting up startups because just that they have so much more to lose in terms of financial security. So I'm wondering if you went through that yourself, and if you did, how did you get through it?
No, I didn't. I go through that. I don't know why. You know, since we grew up with nothing. I sort of, and especially in school, you know, like every week I had to go to a special office and get lunch tickets for lunch that were gray instead of the green ones that the other kids' parents paid for, and so I got the gray one. You know, I was like, really? Like, high school is hard enough that you have to, like, give me the gray lunch tickets, to single me out. Like, why are yours gray? And so I sort of had to develop a sense of humor about it and be like, why are yours green? I don't know if that's the right color. And so, but, like, since we had nothing, I grew up with an aversion to coupons. Like, no, won't use it. I don't want coupons. I don't want to try to save money. I want to spend more money. Like, someone would call me up on, you know, like, hello, we'd like to, I want to talk to you today about saving money with your telephone plan. And I would say, no, actually, I'd like to spend extra money. And, you know, like, you know, and so, and my mother would, you know, she was always on my, like, as I was getting older, she was like, if you keep buying those Starbucks coffees, you're never going to be able to own a house. And I was like, okay, I'm buying extra Starbucks coffees now. Forget it. I'm going to get one of those fancy ones, even though I don't like them. So I definitely didn't have that. I just sort of, like I said earlier, I just believed in some sort of fictitious future self who was going to be much smarter and figure it all out, and I'm just going to rack up debt and do whatever I want and spend a lot of money and whatever I could get my hands on, get 3 credit cards, 4 credit cards, and somehow my future self would take care of it. So I don't know if that's an outlying thing or I was just weird or, you know, like I said, I don't recommend it because I could have easily just been, you know, sitting here, well, not sitting here, and
Right.
just been riddled with debt and never able to, so I don't know, it just was.
Let's have another question
Yeah.
from the audience. Yes, right here, gentleman with the beard.
Hey Biz, thanks so much for the great talk. My name is Slava. We met earlier at the coffee machine. So we actually tried. We just tried jelly. Pretty cool stuff.
Did you get an answer?
But that's the thing. Because it's so deeply subjective. It's really difficult to find the answers we need at this moment. So in terms of your experience with Twitter and all the other startups, how would you go to get to critical mass now with jelly, based on your learnings from your previous ventures?
Well, based on my learning, so yeah, after Twitter, I started Medium, which was just referenced with Ev, and then I was gonna stay there, but then Ben and I had this idea for jelly, and we couldn't get it out of our heads. Went to everybody, and like I went to Jack, and I was like, should I do this? And he was like, oh my God, it's a great idea, you should totally do it. And I was like, I was hoping somebody to talk me out of it because I didn't want to like go through all this again. And so what I've learned is this. I mean, even within the 2 other tries of jelly and super, we actually built networks. I mean, we built social networks from scratch that grew, which is hard. So the way to go about it basically is to try to focus on a few verticals. So we're calling Jelly a search engine. I mean, really what it is it's a Q&A service. But what we're doing is we're using deep tech to amplify humanity's ability to answer these questions so that we need very little people like sort of the hope is that we need, maybe 10,000 people to serve 100 million customers, because the technology should be able to amplify all this. But I don't know if the ratios are right, but you get the idea. And I think in order to get started, what we need to do is we need to sort of nail it in a few different verticals. Because I'll say another thing. Every Q&A service that's out there that's been really successful is usually in a specific vertical, like Stack Overflow or Mumsnet or whatever it is. They're in one vertical and they're doing great. And we're trying to be in every vertical and deep there. And so, but what we need to do is, I think, prove that we can be good at a few, like parenting, fitness, and some other thing. And then if we can just crush it in those, then we can prove the model works and sort of start entering into the other things. And hopefully attract influential people to start using it and telling their followers that, oh my gosh, this is great. I mean, jelly is one of those things it's not going to pop overnight. It's just not. It's a utility. And so it'll grow via word of mouth. And people, this time around, we're also building it as a platform. We haven't gotten to this point yet, but the idea is Jelly works on the web right now. It works on our mobile app. But it should also work, if you ask a question on Twitter, you get an answer on Twitter from Jelly. If you ask a question in Yahoo, in a Yahoo Mail group, there's a Jelly signs itself up to the Yahoo Mail group and answers your question. And you're just like, what is this? Who is this Jelly guy? And why is he so good at answering all my questions? And so eventually what hopefully happens is, people will find out who we are and start coming to us directly. And I think it'll be a slow thing, but and also with the voice UI, or the voice operating system, that's an opportunity really to just sort of corner a market. If we can be the search engine for the voice operating system, then we've got something. Because these things are Amazon has sold more Echoes, I think, already than all of their Kindles combined. It's a crazy popular product. They can't even build them fast enough. So anyway, get strong in some verticals, prove it, and then spread from there. Should have just said that.
Thank you for this very inspiring talk. I'm Diana. I'm from Colombia, and I'm doing a PhD here at Oxford in peace building and technology. You have talked a lot about giving voice to people and using these apps for social change in a way. I was wondering if you have explored that road, like using these tools for social change, and particularly for peace building, and what challenges have you might face if that is the case? Thank you.
Yeah, I've always, as soon as I saw blogging, and I was one of the early first 12 bloggers or something, I just knew that this idea that anyone could now participate on the internet was going to be a really big deal. Prior to blogging, it almost seemed like the internet was a read-only service, and now once blogging came out, I was like, oh my God, now there's going to be voice to the voiceless, and even at Blogger is obviously a much slower and more cumbersome version of Twitter, but there were people that could only get their voice out through an anonymous blog and could only sort of report on things that were happening in the world through an anonymous blog. And these people are being imprisoned over here, and it's a human right violation, and we sort of noticed that sort of stuff happening. And so we had experience in that area, and so when we formed Twitter, we were very keen to protect the freedom of speech and make sure that we could give voice to the voiceless. And there was a lot of things that happened, like the Arab Spring, but we were careful not to not to take credit for that, because that wasn't something we did. That was something that brave people did, and Twitter happened to be an easy-to-use tool, the right tool, the right time, and so yeah, and then so now that it comes to business, you have this tool where people are like, okay, freedom of speech. I can say whatever I want. I can be as nasty as I want, and I can abuse the system, and I can do hate speech and everything else. So now you get into a realm where I think now is the time to reassess what free speech means on the internet, and specifically with regard to anonymity. It's important for some people. It's life or death for some people when it comes to anonymity. But for most people, it's not. For most people, they sort of hide behind anonymity for bullying and hate speech and things like this. So I think there needs to be a new approach to what does free speech mean on the internet, where nobody can see you, and it's a whole thing. But anyway, I think we're still learning. We're still figuring it out. I have an actual specific plan, but I'm not going to go into it now. I just think the idea of free speech and real names and so forth needs to be adjusted a little bit in order for businesses based on this to thrive, and for people to be able to enjoy them and use them. But also, it has to be protected so that these people for whom the service is life or death are also still able to use it, and the way they use it.
Let's see, we have maybe time for one more question. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, I'm Rama. Thanks for your insights. So one question is, do you still give a cheers to your future self, and what does that look like?
I was just thinking of that. Out in the hallway, I was like, what do I want to be? Where do I want to be in 10 years? Like, you always ask yourself, or you should ask yourself, what does my company look like in 5 or 10 years? So that you can sort of aim for that trajectory. I have a personal sort of hallucinogenically optimistic aspiration for humanity in 1,000 years. And, no, 10,000 years. Forget which. I think it was originally 1,000 years, and then I was like, never going to happen in 1,000 years, 10,000 years. So I have this vision for humanity in 10,000 years, and what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, let's rewind from that 10,000-year vision. What did I do now to help make that happen? And obviously, I'm not going to do it by myself. But the vision is essentially it's global collaboration. It's no more people like bombing each other. It's one humanity. It's no particular. You're not a member of a particular city, state, or country. You're a member. You're a citizen of Earth, and if we could learn to all collaborate together, we could get so much more done than ever before. We could do in 1 year what it would normally take 100. Take, for example, just a stupid example would be, Google spent all these years, with all these computer PhDs and scientists and everything, figuring out how to build a wonderfully efficient a data center. And they really just nailed it. They cracked the code. And then Facebook had to figure it all out themselves and spend years and hire a computer scientist to figure it. And it was already done. But they had to do it all again. Facebook has since actually open sourced their method, which is fantastic, because now the next big company doesn't have to come do it all over again. Now imagine that across every field of endeavor. If everyone just said, like, okay, we figured this out, now we can go on to the next, and everyone just builds on each other's work, and then the side effects of all these things, the side effect of global collaboration would be the end to disease, the end to hunger, the end to poverty. I think these would just all be side effects to it, which would be wonderful side effects. And so I say, okay, that's what I would love to see humanity at that point in 10,000 years. So what can I do now? And so what I'm doing now is, trying to network people to help each other, which is one small thing. I also have other things cooking. Like I have an idea for a sci-fi series that gets young people interested in STEAM education, but that's beside the point. So I forget what the question was, but nevertheless, I propose a future in which we're all collaborating instead of killing each other.
On that high note, I'd like to thank Biz. That was